when you look at this team, it does really feel like they are buying in, like they're buying into the work part of it. They're buying into the defensive part of it. They're still figuring things out. They're still, sort of babies in their basketball journey together as a team. But at the same time, if you have a team that's willing to work hard and compete and they're coachable, it's hard to put a ceiling on that level of team. And we're talking about right now, Nick, a team that hasn't had potentially the number one pick in the NBA draft.
Pay heed, all who enter, and beware of this podcast. That's right. This is the Pay Heed podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer, and of course, I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Kevin is back. We talked about post-game against KU football for Utah. Their season is over. KU finishes 5-7. Just real quick off the top here, we're going to spend a lot of time talking KU basketball on today's show, but just off the top, some important dates to know. Remember, the NCAA has changed the transfer portal. So this year, the transfer portal is going to open on January 2nd, and it closes on the 16th, I believe. So it's a 2-week window. So obviously that time period is going to be very hectic. Now, that being said, you will see, and I already have seen probably many reports of players basically intending to enter the transfer portal. Just know that nothing really becomes official on January 2nd. So we'll obviously be monitoring what KU does in terms of bringing in new players. Also, if players potentially depart the program, if there's any changes staff-wise for KU, of course, we'll be talking about all that. But as of right now, it's the end of the season for KU football. No real movement since the last time we spoke on Friday afternoon after KU lost against Utah. But just wanted to set the record straight on that. If you have not already, please subscribe on Apple and Spotify and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You should definitely be subscribed on YouTube because you can expect us to be live after KU and UConn coming up tomorrow night on a Tuesday night. If you're listening to this on Tuesday morning tonight, Kansas and UConn will be doing battle at Allen Fieldhouse. Kevin and I are going to be live for our post-game reaction after the game. It'll be another late night because it's an 8 o'clock tip, so we'll probably live around 10:15, 10:30 Tuesday night after the game. So if you're amped up after a big KU win, or if you need somebody to console you after a potential KU loss, we're going to be live no matter what happens after the game. And the best way to make sure that you know when to join us is to be subscribed. So you can do that on a YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. Come join us. Come hang out with other great KU fans. Share a comment. Join the conversation. We've really loved doing those shows and love it when people come join us for them. So you should do that. You should join us. All right, Kevin, we didn't get a chance to get some of your reaction to what KU did during Thanksgiving week. Kansas goes on a 3-0 run at the Players era, culminating in a third-place game victory over Tennessee. And they win that one. They did obviously play the tournament without Darryn Peterson. We're going to spend a lot of time on Darryn Peterson coming up later in the show, so don't worry about that. But just initially, what was your reaction to what KU did? And now that you've had some days to digest sort of what they did over the course of that week and culminating in that win against Tennessee, what was your takeaways from how KU performed in that tournament?
What a difference a few minutes makes, right? You come out of halftime and Tennessee goes up 12 and you're kind of like, that's rough. Trey White gets into foul trouble and he was the guy in the first half kind of keeping you in it. And I think a lot of us, I'll raise my hand here. I always tell you guys, I will say when I am wrong. I was watching that game and I was like, that's it, right? That's a rough way to go out. Nice to go 2-1. But then something clicked, Nick, and you started to not only did this team kind of scrap and fight like we've talked about them having that in there, but we've talked about Elmarko Jackson a little bit, Nick, in terms of how much he has struggled this year and how much we felt like, man, this guy he needs to have something go right. It felt like he was losing confidence by the minute. And Elmarko Jackson turned into the best player in college basketball for like a 15-minute period or so. And when you added that to, the way that Melvin Council really battled and attacked, and, it was nice for him to see the ball drop on some of those drives and how clutch he was. One of the things I've loved about Melvin Council, Nick, just as a quick aside, is there are certain guys that don't want the ball at the end of games. They can be a point guard for 35 minutes, but when it comes to shooting free throws at the end of the game, Melvin Council wants that ball. And I think when you look at El Marco's performance, when you look at the way that they just got after Tennessee as a whole roster, and really attacked after falling down, it would have been very easy for us to be sitting here talking about a 15-point loss and saying, well, at least they beat Notre Dame and Syracuse, who they were supposed to beat. They were shorthanded, but no, they bowed up and they got the job done. And that was, quite frankly, pretty incredible to see compared to sort of what our conversations were, let's say, post-Princeton, and what we thought of this team without Darryn Peterson in those situations.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, and I kind of talked about it in the show I did immediately after KU beat Tennessee, is, Kevin, this Kansas team has Bill Self guys. They have dogs, right? Like they have guys that want to play the Kansas style of basketball. And that's honestly, I think, what so much of Kansas fans have been yearning for over the past several seasons, right? Is players that just go out there and want it more. And you talk about the Melvin Council, I think he's exhibit A of that type of player that just goes out and just you can just tell he just wants it more. He just wants it more, right? And that's not a knock against what KU had in the past couple seasons, but it's easy, I think, to sit here and say, well, if the same situation had occurred for Kansas in 2024 or 2023, they probably do go out and lose by 12 to 15 points, right? Like they maybe didn't necessarily have quite the spark they needed and quite the energy they needed to overcome something like that. And this iteration of Kansas did have it, right? In the form of Melvin Council, in the form of Marco Jackson flipping the switch, right? Like they absolutely had it. They had guys that wanted to be out there together and play hard for each other. And so that's a big positive, because I think that is so much of exactly what KU fans have been wanting basically since 2022, right? Is
Sure.
a team that is easy to root for, a team of guys that are easy to watch, easy to enjoy playing, and they reflect that back, that they enjoy playing together. They enjoy playing for Kansas. I think that's so much of what KU fans have been looking for. And it really seems like this team has that, at least from what we saw against Tennessee. Obviously, it's still early in the season, so still plenty of games to go. There's probably going to be a lot more ups and downs over the course of the season, but just in that, basically 20 minutes, essentially the second half of the Tennessee game, if that's what you want to call it, the team proved that. The team showed that, and I think that's exactly what fans have been wanting. So it's very, very exciting, and you hope that continues.
Yeah, and I love your point about them liking to play together, right? I felt like that was maybe a little bit of, I hate to even say unspoken, because I feel like people online mentioned it. Last year's team didn't seem to particularly enjoy playing together. And, maybe that's reading too much into it. Maybe that's whatever. None of us are in the locker room, but just the way that they interacted felt different than it does to watch these guys interact. They're genuinely excited for everybody to make plays. They're excited for Jamari McDowell to make shots. They're excited, when Flory is out there dunking on guys, everybody gets really fired up. And you see that in the post-game interviews, right? Like the way that they're kind of hanging on each other and cheesing and all of those things. And I get, hey, it may feel different if you lose to West Virginia in a rough game and there's adversity, and maybe you're going to have a little bit of a different reaction. But for right now, Nick, not only does this team fight, but to your point, they seem genuinely happy to be at Kansas playing with and for one another. And that's a really pleasant thing to see as sort of an outside observer as well.
Yeah, I will say winning cures a lot.
Right? Oh, yeah, sure.
It's easy to feel good after a win. You're right. Maybe if this team does face more adversity later in the season, hopefully we'll continue to see that level of fight and energy. But yeah, winning cures a lot, and for them to come back and beat a pretty good Tennessee team, obviously was significant. And I love what you mentioned as well. In the post-game interview, it was Darryn Peterson, I think, was the first guy that got in there and was kind of like, barking. And then, you get Melvin Council. So, we'll talk more about Darryn Peterson here in a few minutes, but yeah, it really does seem like this is a team of guys that the pieces fit together, right? And that's what I would say about maybe last year in particular is it's maybe not so much of, man, the guys didn't like each other. It's really just simply comes down to they didn't fit well, right? The style of play wasn't necessarily, conducive to what they had. And so that was so much of what you and I discussed over the course of the spring and into the early summer during the transfer portal window was Kansas maybe needs to stop focusing on going out and finding the guys that are averaging 18 points per game at whatever their previous school was and start going and finding guys that fit into the system that Bill Self wants to play and fit better together with each other, right? And to me, at least, it seems like Bill Self absolutely did that. The staff absolutely did that. They went out and instead of looking for, the flashy names, went and got some guys that look like they fit in Bill Self's system. They play well together. And you saw the results of that against Tennessee, which is, again, last year, that game probably doesn't go the way for Kansas. And this year, because you've got a group of guys that seemingly fit better together and are, playing hard for each other, the result is you're able to battle back and get a really good win on a neutral court against a top 15, top 20-ish team in Tennessee.
Yeah, and I think the buy-in, right, has been complete at this point. I'm not going to say they don't drive Self nuts. Like you see the odd turnover out there, the bad decision, or a missed defensive rotation. You still get the Bill Self hands on his head or the what are you doing? But people forget you got that when you had Frank Mason and Devontae Graham, right? That's a Self feature, not a bug, so to speak. And so when you look at this team, it does really feel like they are buying in, like they're buying into the work part of it. They're buying into the defensive part of it. They're still figuring things out. They're still, sort of babies in their basketball journey together as a team. But at the same time, if you have a team that's willing to work hard and compete and they're coachable, it's hard to put a ceiling on that level of team. And we're talking about right now, Nick, a team that hasn't had potentially the number one pick in the NBA draft in that mix, and they're still getting wins like this. They played 2 games with Darryn Peterson, and they're number 17 in net. And I get that net isn't everything, but I do think that coming off the Princeton game, which was one of the early games, obviously, without Darryn Peterson, you're looking at it and you're saying, gosh, is this a top 30 team without Darryn Peterson? And a win like you got against Tennessee, the showings that you got against Notre Dame and Syracuse, I think is an affirmative that, yeah, this may be a top 25 team without Darryn Peterson. Of course, then you get Darryn Peterson back. You get all the pieces working together. And I love that part of it too, Nick. And I'm sure we'll talk about it when we talk about Darryn Peterson. But I did feel like that when they played with Darryn Peterson, there was some semblance of, hey, I'm gonna watch bro work, right? And I think that because of the way this played out, as weird as it sounds, because you never want to be without your star player, they could come out ahead in the long run because guys figured out, hey, we aren't, Danny and the Miracles from 1988. We aren't, one guy and then a bunch of guys who served to prop this guy up. And I know Danny Manning always hated that team name and always felt like his teammates got undersold with all of that. But in this case, it did look a little bit like Darryn and the Miracles kind of early on. And now, Darryn goes out and you're starting to see like, okay, you've got other pieces here. Flory is playing like you would want Flory to play if he wants to go to the NBA draft. Didn't have a perfect game against Tennessee, missed some close-in shots, got some stuff blocked, still wound up battling, playing well defensively, I thought, for the most part, and doing some things. Melvin Council hasn't been perfect, but, with that level of scrap and effort, you'll take it. If you get anything like that from Marco Jackson again, I mean, you should pretty much, pray to God on that thing. But Jamari McDowell stepping up and making himself a key part of the rotation. I think, I'll be interested to see, can they get Cole Rosario up and running? Can Trey White, he's such a smart player in so many aspects. Can he cut down on some of the dumb fouls that cost him time against Tennessee? And can you continue to build on some of that early success you had with Bryson Tiller? You add all of that to Darryn Peterson, and all of a sudden I think you've got a pretty potent cocktail, especially as they continue to grow together.
Yeah, I do want to dive a lot deeper into Darryn Peterson. Bill Self gave an update today on Monday morning as we are recording this. So we'll take a quick break. I want to talk about Darryn Peterson. We're also going to be previewing KU and UConn coming up later on in the show. All that and more is coming up next.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer alongside Kevin Flaherty. We are brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you have not already, please subscribe on Apple and Spotify on audio and on a YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. And again, I'll reiterate, you want to subscribe on YouTube because that's where we do our YouTube live shows. We're definitely going to be doing one for KU and UConn tomorrow night on Tuesday night, or if you're listening to this on Tuesday tonight in the future. Kansas taking on UConn at Allen Fieldhouse at 8 o'clock. We will be live Tuesday night immediately following that game around 10:30. So it'll be a bit of a late night for us, but we'll be up recapping that game, reacting to that game, and you should come join us. And the best way to do that is to be subscribed on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. All right, Kevin, you kind of touched on scratching the surface of Darryn Peterson and sort of the latest updates with him. Bill Self spoke to the media on this morning, about literally within the last 30 minutes of us recording this episode here on Monday afternoon, and kind of gave a bit of a wishy-washy answer on Darryn Peterson. Basically said that he's been running up and down the court practicing and looking good, but that no official determination will be made until essentially the morning, so Tuesday morning. Basically is when we should be hopefully getting word of whether or not he'll be able to go against UConn. And I have to assume he's going to play, right? Like, I mean, you hold him out for the entire week in Las Vegas, I think specifically for this reason, right? In terms of looking ahead to this game against UConn. But I think there's some interesting dynamics here to talk about it. And you kind of started to touch on a little bit before the break, but the first and foremost is, you mentioned, we kind of saw when Darryn Peterson first went out that Kansas was not exactly fully functional as a team, right? They were a bit disjointed in some of those games without him. But then you saw what they did in Las Vegas, and particularly in the Tennessee game, and it looked like they didn't even need him. They were playing well together, right? They got what they needed. So I guess to tee this all off, let's assume Darryn Peterson is going to play against UConn. What is a realistic expectation for A, what he will look like, and B, what this team will look like with him back on the floor? Because like you mentioned, the games we did see him, it kind of did feel like a lot of, hey, get DP the ball and get the hell out of the way, right? Yeah. Now that we've seen this team play without him, it feels like maybe those guys have a little bit more confidence in their own games, right? So what's realistic out of him individually, and maybe out of how this team is going to respond when you're inserting such a impactful player back into the lineup?
I'm going to give you a really unpopular answer that a lot of people should probably use more often, Nick, and that's, I don't know. And the reason I say that is I think in the long run, obviously, they're going to be significantly better. But if we're talking about what they're going to look like on Tuesday night, what you can expect from Darryn Peterson, Self says he's been running up and down the court looking good, and says, by the way, if he gets cleared tomorrow, he's starting. So that makes me think like, okay, it's probably going to happen. That, you're not saying, well, we'll see how many minutes he can get. You're saying, oh, if he's cleared, like he's straight to the starting lineup. But I don't know 100% how it's all going to look immediately, right? And I think that was kind of your question, because I think one of Darryn Peterson's undersold talents, and you and I had his high school coach on our show, and he talked about this. I actually think he's really good at getting other guys involved and creating for other people. I think what's going to be interesting now is, hey, I make that skip pass to the corner off of pick and roll. Does Melvin Council have the confidence now to put that thing on the ground and get to the rim real quick? And not that he lacked confidence before, but how is what we've seen over the last week going to sort of mesh in with, okay, Darryn Peterson is probably going to be your primary ball handler again, your primary offensive creator, cog, whatever you want to call it. And so that's what I don't know. In the long run, they're going to be better because there are things that Darryn Peterson does that you can't coach and that you can't defend, quite frankly. I don't know. How much NBA ball do you watch, Nick? I feel like I ask you this like every few episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'll be honest. I'm not a huge NBA guy. I mean, I'll follow. I wouldn't say that I watch very many games throughout the year, like on a regular basis. So.
There's a theory out there that NBA teams don't play defense, which, as somebody who watches a lot of NBA, is not true. Like, yeah, you might have a guy avoid taking a charge in game 43 of 82 or something like that. But generally speaking, they play really complicated defense. It's just those guys can score where you can defend pretty well, and it's almost impossible to stop guys from scoring or passing the ball around to get an open shot because of how spaced out everything is, because of how good everything is. There was a debate a few years ago, people were talking about the Redeem Team, right? And if they played the Dream Team, who would win? And of course, everybody's going to be like, well, Michael Jordan, whatever. But one of the things that Rick Barnes talked about, because, he was at Texas at the time, was he was like, look, like everybody talks about how good a defender Scottie Pippen was. And he was, right? He's one of the elite defenders in NBA history. But Kevin Durant's 7 feet tall and can shoot like to 35 feet, right? There's no defense for that. Like, you get a hand in his face and he can still make that shot because he just shoots over the top of you. And all of that is a really long and convoluted way to say that's some of what Darryn Peterson brings to this thing is teams can scheme up to stop Darryn Peterson. They can blitz him off of ball screens. They can do different things to try and stop him from getting to his spots, getting to where he wants to take most of his attempts, so on and so forth. And Nick, he's still Darryn Peterson. He's still going to hit the shot with a hand in his face sometimes. He's still going to, when you blitz the ball screen, be able to split that blitz and get to where he wants. There are going to be times where he passes out of that stuff and gets you a really good look. And I think that that's the part that when we're projecting, hey, where does this team look in March with Darryn Peterson back with this group of guys? I don't know 100% what it's going to look like with UConn. I think it's going to be a fascinating look to see how it all meshes. But I do think that in the long run, having those guys playing with confidence, having those guys playing attack-minded alongside the things that Darryn Peterson does that you can't really defend, can't really do anything with, can make this team, a pretty nasty buzzsaw, to be honest.
Well, it took KU a couple of games, I think, to adjust to fully playing without Darryn Peterson, right?
Yeah.
I think it's safe to assume it's going to take a little bit of time when he does fully return for them to adjust to playing back with him, which I think kind of leads into what you were talking about with this game against UConn, where it's like, who knows, right? Like maybe it might not look the prettiest, every possession with Darryn Peterson out there just because you're inserting a guy like that back in the lineup. But on the flip side, Darryn Peterson is so good that he can probably overcome that in certain situations, to where if it's a close game late, maybe you can still just simply give it to him and let him do his thing and potentially win you the game against UConn. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, right? Like I think there's got to be some level of adjustment to when you have a guy that is literally like a 35%, 40% usage rate type player, you take him away. Okay, yes, it's going to take a few games maybe to get accustomed to that. But then when you just throw him back into the starting lineup, which is what it sounds like may happen if he's going to play, there's also got to be some adjustment there as well, because Melvin Council's been the primary ball handler. Melchior Jackson's been, handling the ball quite a bit. Now you add in a guy that's going to be doing a lot more of that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think my expectations for Darryn Peterson individually are still very high just because of the type of player that he is if he does end up playing. But it could be a game again where maybe the offense in the half court looks a little bit shaky, which truthfully, it wasn't exactly the prettiest offense in the half court without him over the course of the tournament in Vegas, right? So a lot of KU's biggest success came when they were able to get out and run in transition and make plays, right? So that's part of it too. But yeah, I think overall, it's hard not to be incredibly, incredibly enticed by Darryn Peterson individually. It's just a matter of, does it add on to what KU's been doing over the last week in Las Vegas, or is it a situation where it takes a little bit of time to sort of recalibrate with everybody back in place. Bill Self, just real quickly, also did give an update on Jaden Dawson. He's been practicing. We'll see what he does. Again, he seemingly injured his wrist on a pregame dunk attempt, which that was why we saw a lot more Jamar McDowell, which again, Jamar McDowell is probably not getting enough shine for his performances in Las Vegas. Just stepping in and being exactly what you want him to be, right? Just a role guy who's in the right spot. He's able to hit a couple threes over the course of the tournament. So, I mean, he did a fantastic job and probably deserves a lot more of his flowers for what he gave Kansas. Before we take a break and dive deeper into UConn, you mentioned no Marco Jackson, so I feel like it's only pertinent that we close out the segment by saying, what do you expect? It was the Tennessee game a blip on what is otherwise going to be an underwhelming season for Marco Jackson, or are we going to look and say the Tennessee game was the start of the Marco Jackson redemption arc?
It may be a little bit of both, and I'm not saying he's going to drop 17 or 15 and a half again. But I do think that there were some things that he showed against Tennessee that are translatable, right? I mean, the way that he got downhill and attacked, that's the thing about El Marco. He is a freaky athlete. That's the reason he was a 5-star recruit. Like, strip away everything else, and the reason that El Marco Jackson is at Kansas is he is a ridiculous athlete. And when he gets downhill and attacks like that, I don't know how you felt watching it, Nick, but I thought KU's guards looked really quick in that game. When you look at Council, when you looked at El Marco and the way that they were getting after it. And so El Marco did make a couple threes in that game. He's still got a little bit of a line drive, stroke. I'm not saying there's going to be games where he comes out and hits 4 threes or anything ridiculous like that. But if he just plays with confidence, defends, and then gets downhill and utilizes that athleticism, he's going to get to the free throw line because he's going to be tough in those situations. But I think what we saw in previous games was he was more tentative with it, right? He wasn't dribbling with purpose, and a lot of times he was dribbling into bad situations where he was taking one dribble, realizing, hey, I just wound up in the middle of the defense, picking up the dribble or trying to make a bad pass, and it was a bad situation. If he's waiting and being patient until those lanes are there and then getting downhill, then he's somebody that can absolutely be a valuable piece here. I'm not expecting, hey, El Marco is automatically going to jump into the starting lineup or he's going to be an all Big 12 guy or any of these things. But I do think that part of it, the athleticism, the aggression with which he attacked the basket against Tennessee, I think that those are things that could be translatable from that performance, and he would be a lot more valuable part of this team if he did those things.
Yeah, I hope so, right? Because even with Darryn Peterson healthy, Marco Jackson is still basically your third guard, right?
Yep.
So you still want him to be somebody that can come off the bench and be reliable and play consistent minutes, because it's basically Darryn Peterson, Melvin Council, and Marco Jackson. So you still want him to be somebody that can contribute. So yeah, I hope it is a springboard for him. I think me personally, and I think you too as well, Kevin, the two of us have I think held out hope that Marco Jackson is going to figure it out probably a bit longer than some other people, but hopefully Tennessee is the start of something for him. Let's take one more quick break. We'll come back and preview a little bit of KU and UConn coming up at Allen Fieldhouse. That is coming up next.
What's up, guys? It is Benny Heiss, KCSN betting analyst, and Missouri, your moment is finally here. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is now live right here in the state. So now you can make every game so much more exciting with same-game parlays, money lines, props, and more, all from your phone, and it's all safe, secure, and easy to use. And listen, we know fans in the state of Missouri know game day, whether it's the tailgates, the noise, the passion. And now with DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bring that same energy to every snap, every touchdown, and every win. Right now, new Missouri customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. There's no waiting, no nonsense, just pure action powered by America's top-rated sportsbook app. So here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use the code KCSN. Code KCSN. Remember, new Missouri customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets instantly. That's code KCSN. The crown is yours in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility and restrictions apply. Terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Bonus bets expire 7 days after they're issued. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, please see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos.
This is the Paid Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Apprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. Once again, if you haven't already, please subscribe Apple, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN for all of our great content. Plus, if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe and you'll be notified for our live shows, which we are going to be going live for KU and UConn on Tuesday night. And then you can come join us, hang out with us, and join many great Kansas fans that hang out with us as well. So be subscribed on YouTube so that you know when we do our live shows. We're going to be doing more live shows over the course of KU basketball season after big games. So you can expect us to have plenty more opportunities to do live shows where you guys come and join us and interact with us as well. All right, Kansas taking on UConn at Allen Fieldhouse in a top 25 matchup. UConn is currently number 7 in KenPom. They are 6-1, of course, coached by Dan Hurley. They're coming off of a pretty impressive win against Illinois in a semi-home game, if that's what you want to call it, I guess, on a sort of a neutral court. They won that one 74-61. Their one loss this season came against Arizona, which they lost at home 71-67. They also have a win over BYU. Those are the two biggest wins. They played really some nobodies besides that, but they're 6-1, and they're rolling into Allen Fieldhouse. And this is a team with some names that you may recognize from kind of what UConn's been doing over the past couple seasons with the runs they've made, obviously with back-to-back national championships and whatnot. They still have Alex Karaban on their roster. He's certainly a guy to keep an eye on, but there's plenty of new faces as well on this team for UConn coming into Allen Fieldhouse. Kevin, we obviously talked about Darryn Peterson and his potential return and what that might look like for Kansas, but what do you see out of UConn and what do you expect from them coming into Allen Fieldhouse?
Yeah, and my understanding is Terrace Reed is going to be back healthy and playing more too. He returned against Illinois in their win against Illinois, and I think played 15 minutes, committed 4 fouls, so not good for him in that one. But in all seriousness, he's a guy that I think is going to make this a really interesting game, Nick. In that, if you remember when UConn came to Allen Fieldhouse 2 years ago, Kansas switched 1 through 4. The one guy they didn't switch on was Klingon, and they had Hunter Dickinson, who was, a big enough body basically to bang with Klingon, and so they switched those other spots, and it held up pretty well, right? Like they were able to do a nice job against a lot of UConn's actions, but Tristan Newton wound up just being a flamethrower, and quite frankly, kept UConn around probably longer than it should have been for the way that game played out. But the reason I bring up Terrace Reed is the fact that Terrace Reed is a lot bigger than Flory Badunga. He makes his living around the rim. And so if you're switching 1 through 4 in this situation, because I don't think you can switch 1 through 5 again with a legitimate center like Terrace Reed, you're going to have a situation where maybe Reed is able to get some looks on the interior against Flory with that superior size, strength, and bulk. It's going to be up to Flory to take advantage of it on the other end, right? If you're mismatched size and strength on one end, you can use your quickness on the other. And so I think that's going to be a big key. Another thing that's interesting, I always think about UConn's offense because their offense it's so much fun to watch if you love basketball. I mean, the actions they run are beautiful. They put defenders in binds, and then they have really smart and skilled players making decisions with the ball with your defender in that bind. And I think the defense maybe gets overlooked a little bit in this case. Nick, they are absolutely elite at preventing buckets off the catch right now. And so if you're looking at, hey, let's kick this thing out to open shooters and have them make catch and shoot shots, UConn hasn't been allowing a whole lot of that. The points that they've been giving up have, they've made guys put it on the floor and then do some different things with it from that standpoint. And so I think this is going to be a really tough matchup because it's going to test your defensive rotations because they have to be so crisp with the way you switch and the way that you do things. And then we've seen, Nick, Kansas under Bill Self in recent years, and this team in particular, they've had some aggressive help off of guys on the outside. If you're helping like that off of a Malachi Smith, he's shooting better than 50% from 3. If you're helping off of Alex Caravan, he has been absolutely thermonuclear from the outside. And so everybody really needs to stay connected, and you can't have that guy kind of leaning in to help and giving up an open jump shot to one of the guys that you really don't want taking those shots. Solo ball has been a lot more inconsistent with it, but you have to be very careful about staying attached to guys like that, because I do think that Trey White is a guy that could defend Alex Caravan and could stick with him. The key is you can't leave Alex Caravan to go help with somebody else. You really, really, really have to pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, I love that you started the conversation with Tarris Reed and Floyd Badunga, because to me, that's one of the biggest keys in this game.
Yeah.
We've seen Flory struggle, truthfully, against guys that are bigger and stronger than him, quite frankly. Even in his sophomore season, right? You think back like the North Carolina game, and even against Tennessee, he had some shots blocked by some of the bigger guys that they had, and this is another matchup that's going to be like that. But the aspect of it that I think is most critical, Kevin, is Floyd Badunga at the Players era did a phenomenal job of not committing fouls.
Yes.
That is going to be something else he's going to have to do against Tarris Reed and UConn, is defend the size and strength of Reed without getting into foul trouble. That's going to be, I think, probably one of the biggest things that I'll be keeping an eye on. Is you can't use your quickness and speed against Tarris Reed if you're on the bench because you got 2 fouls in the first half, right?
Yep.
or whatever the situation may be. So that, I think, is probably the most critical aspect of it, is how is Flory going to deal with that size and strength in terms of defending without fouling? And then offensively, again, we've seen Flory do more post-ups and have more, traditional post moves against a guy like Tarris Reed. Is he going to have much success doing that? Right? So that's kind of where I look at with that matchup is, hey, first and foremost, don't commit fouls. But secondly, if you're going to utilize that speed, if you're going to utilize the athletic ability, what does that look like if you're trying to, have post moves on the half court? So that's certainly a key matchup. And then the other thing you mentioned is UConn's been really good from three. They've been shooting the ball really, really well to start the season from the perimeter, headlined by the guys that you mentioned. So you've got to figure out a way to make sure that you don't let that dictate the game. And then the other thing that UConn's done a great job of, that you also highlighted, Kevin, is they're also top 15 in the country in opponent 3-point percentage. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're not giving up open looks. Like you mentioned, they are a team that's going to get out on you and make sure that, you've got a contested shot in your face. So that's going to be key, right? And that's maybe where, if Darryn Peterson is playing, how much can his gravitational pull affect the UConn defense to where maybe you are able to get a chance to get some open looks, right, from the outside. And then obviously it comes down to, okay, hey, Trey White, can you hit those threes? Hey, even Bryson Tiller, can you knock that down? Melvin Council, right? Can Cole Rosario get going if he's off the bench again? And that maybe helps him, does Jamar McDowell get more action because Jaden Dawson's not playing? Can he hit some shots? So that'll be something else to watch, is assuming Darryn Peterson does play, how much does his presence really impact UConn's defense, right? When you have a guy of his capacity, is he able to drive into the lane and contract the defense to where, hey, you are going to have open shooters? Or is UConn going to kind of allow him to have a little bit more space to work with? In which case, go cook, go do your thing, right? Like if it's going to be more, they're going to let you kind of have a little bit more freedom to work. Use it, utilize it. That's what I would say if I was, Coach Self and talking to Darryn Peterson, is if you have the ball and UConn's going to give you some respect, especially early in the game, maybe go show them why they shouldn't do that and make them adjust. And then maybe you have the opportunity to find some passes to get some other guys going. So that's what I've been keeping an eye on, is sort of what type of impact does Darryn Peterson have in his return, assuming he does play. And then obviously the Flory thing is so significant, right? Because we've seen now, Paul Mbia is still not there, right? Like he's not somebody that's ready to go in for more than spot minutes, 3 to 5 minutes a game. He's not somebody that I think you can really trust and rely on to be out there for 10, 12, 15 minutes a game. So again, that kind of really puts the highlight and underscores that Flory has to make sure that he's playing smart. And he did an excellent job of that. I mean, he deserves so much credit, I think, for what he did at the Players era, because I think over the course of 3 games of the Players era, he committed 7 fouls, which is very, very impressive. So that has to continue for him. against UConn, because KU needs him out there, quite frankly, I think, in order to maximize their potential, certainly on the offensive end. And then again, he's probably the guy that gives you the best opportunity to try to slow down Reed at the other end. And, I wouldn't describe Reed as a prolific scorer, but if he's able to just bully himself in time and time again, he's going to have, if you just let him keep getting to the rim and shooting right at the rim, he's anybody can be effective, right? If they're able to do that just through their size and strength. So, you got to make sure that you slow that down as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is scouting report, right? Reed is generally speaking not going to shoot from outside. When they bring in Eric Ryba, he's a guy that's very comfortable shooting from the outside. And I know some people will look at the stats and be like, oh, he's 2 for 7 on the year. But he's a freshman, and that's one of the things that is his strength, is he is a 7'1" guy that is very comfortable stepping out behind the arc. He took 5 threes against Arizona in a game and made 2 of them in a game that Reed didn't play in. And so scouting report stuff too. And how do you defend when Ryba is in there and he's at the top of the key? That's the shot that he wants to take. If he's pulling Flaherty out of the lane, are the rest of the guys doing their jobs defensively to where UConn isn't getting shots at the rim with him out there? And so there's a lot of different things here. One thing we didn't mention, though, Nick, UConn fouls. That's been sort of their one defensive weakness so far, has been that they will put people at the free throw line. And I think that when you look at the way this Kansas team can attack, when you look at the fact that Terrace Reed just committed 4 fouls in 15 minutes his last time out there, are you able to get to the free throw line, put guys in foul trouble, maybe get into UConn's bench a little bit? That's an area where maybe Kansas could have an advantage if they get, a foul here, a foul there, and next thing you know, you're not worried about Terrace Reed because he's sitting over by Dan Hurley.
That sort of leads me into this last question I wanted to ask you to end the show, which is KU wins if blank, UConn wins if blank.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think UConn has the better path to victory, honestly. I'm not saying necessarily I would pick UConn to win this game, but I'm saying I think it's a more mainstream path. And that's just basically do what you do, right? Get Kansas into switches, make them move around, put defenders into tough spots to be in. And then, if you can get 8 or 10 points from Terrace Reed, maybe pick up a foul or 2 on Flaherty, you're putting yourself in a really good position. I think Kansas, we've talked about it, I think projects as a really good defensive team in March. I think they'll be switchable. I think they can attack defensively. There's a lot of things that they can really do at that level. I thought at Players Era, Nick, they sort of vacillated a little bit. There were times where that defense looked elite now. And there were times that, hey, you're giving up some open looks and Syracuse isn't making or whatever. And so I think if UConn has patience, does what they do, then this is a game that UConn has a good chance to win. For Kansas, I do think getting to the free throw line is going to be a major key in this one. I'm not saying, hey, you got to shoot 40 free throws to win, but I do think that Kansas needs to be of that mentality, right? And attack and get downhill and, make Terrace Reed move and do the different things, attack, even guys like Alex Caravan. I'm not saying he's a bad defender, but I'm not sure that Caravan is a guy that's super equipped to hold up when Trey White is in aggressive mode offensively, when Bryson Tiller is kind of doing his thing offensively. And so I think all of those things are big. And then, what do you get from Darryn Peterson? If he's out there playing like he did against Louisville, you're going to have a great chance. The other thing is be connected on defense, like we talked about. With your switches, you need to be convicted in making those switches. You need to know when to help, when not to help. And Kansas did a terrific job of this against UConn 2 years ago. They did a fantastic job. But Tristan Newton was just an absolute flamethrower in that game and was hitting step back threes and going nuts, and UConn was still able to kind of hang around. But if you give that level of defensive effort again, Nick, I think Kansas wins this game.
Yeah, I would just reiterate I think UConn wins if Flaherty is in foul trouble.
Yeah.
We saw Kansas against Tennessee overcome Trey White in foul trouble. I don't think that they would be able to overcome, at least right now, would be able to overcome Flaherty missing a lot of time. So that, to me, honestly, I think is part of what it comes down to for Kansas. Just make sure that you can keep Flaherty on the floor and make him and have him stay out of foul trouble, because I don't know that at this stage of the season you could overcome him against this level of opponent. I don't know that you could overcome him, being on the bench for extended periods of time in this game. Now, like you said, potentially the flip side to that is Darryn Peterson just goes nuclear and you can overcome that way. But I don't know if yes, he's such a talented player. He's so good, right? But like in his first game back, I don't know that you can just say, all right, go get 25, go get 30 or whatever it may be. Like, I don't think that's realistic for his first game back. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I think Kansas wins if you get contributions across the board. That to me is what I would look for I know I just made the joke that Darryn Peterson go get 25-30, but I actually think that wouldn't be necessarily the best path to Kansas winning. I think the best path to Kansas winning would be Darryn Peterson, if he plays at a high level, gives you 16. Flaherty gives you maybe 14. Trey White gives you 14, right? Maybe you do get a little bit more from Marco Jackson off the bench, or Melvin Council gives you, I think that probably offers the more realistic path for Kansas, is that you have contributions across the board, to help propel you to the win. Because I think there are games, I think we talked about this in the preseason. I think there are games where, yes, it may just be as simple as Darryn Peterson go get 30 and you'll win, right? But I don't think that's a recipe for winning, consistently, right? So I think it's more realistic to say, okay, Darryn Peterson comes back, plays well, but also you get, double digits from a couple other guys, that really helps propel you. So I think that's kind of what I'm looking for, is because I think that's what helped Kansas at the Players era, was they got contributions across the board, right? It wasn't, there were moments in some of those games where it was, oh, it's Flaherty, oh, it's, Melvin Council, but it felt like holistically through the course of the entire run at the Players era, there were different moments from different guys. That, I think, is what probably you want to replicate if you're KU, and especially in a game like this against an opponent like UConn. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, think about the national championship game in 22, right? You can think of a moment where just about every KU player that touched the floor in that game was a hero, right? Whether Ochai didn't play his best game, but he had some big moments. Christian Brown had some big moments. DeJuan Harris had some big moments. Of course, we all remember Remy's shots and all the things that Remy did. David McCormick gets the last two baskets. Jalen Wilson, had some big plays in that. And you could go up and down and sort of say they won this game because of contributions from pretty much every guy that was touching the court. And I think your point is incredibly well made. That was the strength of KU Players era, not just the Tennessee game, but over the course of those three games, you could pretty much find a hero moment for every player who played, whether it was Jamari McDowell hitting a big shot, Elmarco Jackson's half, Melvin Council we talked about, Flaherty, had some terrific moments. Trey White was unbelievable at times. I'm not trying to leave anybody out. I'm just saying I do think that that's kind of the best path in a big game like this for where this KU roster is right now, is to get contributions from A, B, C, D, E, F, and it not being so much like, okay, here's the contribution from Darryn Peterson. Can somebody maybe help him out?
Yep, 100% agree. I'll leave you with this, Kevin. Flat out, do you think Kansas gets it done? We're going to be talking about it in our post-game show Tuesday night, but do you think they get it done? Do you think they get the win?
I may be eating crow on this afterwards. Actually, I'll say this. I would like UConn if this is a neutral site game. It is not a neutral site game. It is at Allen Fieldhouse. It is a big game, and Bill Self does incredibly well in big games at Allen Fieldhouse. And I know some people will talk about, the last couple years or whatever. Even against Houston last year, barring the late collapse, I mean, KU was putting it on Houston a little bit at Allen Fieldhouse last year. And so I expect this to be one of those games that Kansas really comes out and plays well. And I do think that they get across the finish line. Now, if this game was at Madison Square Garden or United Center or something like that, I might be picking UConn, and I do think that UConn might even be the better team right now. But I think ultimately where it's at, the atmosphere and all the different things that go with that, I think KU gets across the finish line. How about you?
Man, you hear that, KU fans? Kevin is saying that you're the difference. So get out there. If you're planning on being at the game, be loud, make the difference, and hope Kansas gets a win. And I'm going to pick Kansas. I mean, come on. I'm not going to sit here. I go back and forth on Dan Hurley. Sometimes he really, really just pisses me off, quite frankly. I mean, he's whatever, I guess. But I can't pick that guy to come and win on James Naismith court. No, I'm picking Kansas definitely to win this one. Whether it is,
can we get Kansas going over there though? Like I'm not, not this year, but I'd love to make that trip out to Stores. That would be.
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's on the schedule. Maybe
I hope so. I hope so.
I don't know.
I'll be honest, guys. I mean, not that I haven't been watching KU basketball or whatever, but future KU basketball stuff, with football season and recruiting season and all those things, I'm kind of tunnel visioned in. So yeah, I don't know if it's on the schedule in the future. I hope it is. I would think it would be, with UConn obviously doing 2 trips to Allen Fieldhouse in the last 3 years. But I'd love to see KU go out there and do that trip. That would be awesome.
Their previous trip obviously was part of the now defunct Big 12 Big East Challenge.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that this is one where there might be a trip back for Kansas in the future.
Let's go.
That'll be something to watch. But for now, they're coming to our place, and let's give them hell. We'll be live after the game Tuesday night. If you're listening to this on Tuesday, we'll be live tonight after the game, 10:15, 10:30 p.m., pretty much as soon as the game ends or right around there. We'll be live on our YouTube channel. So come join us, come hang out with us, subscribe to the channel, join in on our live comment section. It's always a fun time, and we look forward to hearing from all of you, hopefully after a Kansas win against UConn. But until next time, he's Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you after UConn. See ya.